Good afternoon, everyone. I really did enjoy that previous panel session, so some really interesting points when it comes to tech transfer, commercialization, ecosystem development, and so on. So my power sharing session is to deal with increasing success of lab to market, what should be measured. It's a really tricky topic to discuss, but I will try my best from our perspective at Imperial and most other universities within the UK. So, since I'm from Imperial, I've taken the liberty to talk about Imperial, so I'll be running through a few slides just to give you a gist of what Imperial is all about. So, as with any university, its mission is to achieve consistent excellence in research, education, in science, engineering, medicine, and business, the 4 areas that Imperial specialize in, for the benefit of society. And basically, at a glance, we are over 18,000 students and nearly 3,800 research and academic staff with 190,000 alumni. The college has 4 faculties: the business school, natural sciences, medicine, and engineering. The college has produced 4 Nobel laureates, 3 Fields medalists, and other Royal Society Fellows, Royal Academy of Engineering Fellows, and Academy of Medical Sciences Fellows. So the university is doing really well in terms of our global rankings. First in the UK in its research excellence framework, which is basically an assessment or ranking conducted by Research England, which is the primary entity in the UK that disburses public funding into universities. And Imperial will carry this ranking over the next 7 years until the next REF exercise in 2028. We're also the first in the UK and third in Europe in terms of the world's most innovative universities. I believe we're the 10th in the world from a world stage. Third in Europe, 8th in the world in terms of Times Higher Education World University Rankings. Third in Europe and 6th in the world, QS World University Rankings, and so on. But the last line is again quite good when it comes to the graduate employability. Imperial tops in the UK. And if we were to talk about Imperial and Malaysia, we are one of the UK's top science, engineering, and medicine research collaborator with Malaysia. The Imperial academics have co-authored more than 1,000 publications with their Malaysian peers just over the last 5 years. And we work very closely with Malaysian industry, including Petronas. And if you have a look at the student population, we have at least 500 Malaysian students in our undergraduate courses or postgraduate courses at any one time. And they form the 3rd largest international student population at the college. And then, of course, we have over 2,300 Imperial alumni living in Malaysia. So there are very close ties with Malaysia. And here are some example projects that the college has been involved in. The first one is a Royal Society Newton Advanced Fellowship with Professor Yun Zhu from University of Malaya. And the second one is a collaboration with UTM, Imperial Center for Low Carbon Transport, with labs established both at Imperial as well as UTM in Johor. And the collaboration is into low carbon transport in cooperation with industry partners in the UK, Malaysia, and globally. The funding was provided by UTM to support PhD, postdoctoral, and visiting researchers at Imperial as well as UTM. So it's a dual-way collaboration, and they have conducted many workshops in London and Johor, creating many high-impact publications. The SAFE project is one of the largest ecological experiments in the world. The project focuses on how biodiversity and ecosystem function change as forests are modified by human activities. It's funded by the Sime Darby Foundation, and in collaboration with Southeast Asia Rainforest Research Partnerships and Imperial College London. It's given rise to over 40 Malaysian traineeships and studentships, including undergraduate, masters, and PhD students, and have produced many research papers, over 100 research papers, and in close collaboration with University Malaysia, Sabah, and UTM in Johor. So that's a bit about how Imperial works closely with Malaysian universities as well as industry, as I mentioned, including Petronas and Sime Darby. Now, the topic is related to accelerating innovations to market and what should be measured. And therefore, I thought it would be interesting to first map out what happens in the process, especially when it comes to universities, and how innovations are transferred into the marketplace, because this process would essentially define some of the metrics that we can actually look at. So, mapping publicly funded research, commercialization, and what the metrics involved in the process is very important in this scenario. Prof. Yasmin mentioned about the rate of commercialization and how universities constantly get beaten by governments, by media, that for the low commercialization rate based on some of the metrics they use. And it is the same situation in the UK. The universities are constantly being challenged with the same issue. So if we have a look at the transition from lab to market, you can see the bottom circles here talk about the means by which universities create new innovations through publicly funded research. So we have research grants, and we were talking about blue sky research or fundamental research as well as applied research. So both are encouraged because that's part of the academic mission. And then we also have research collaborations, educations and skill development, partnerships with companies out there and industry, and commercialization processes in order to support the transfer of these, including the technology transfer function. So, the commercial benefit of research conducted in publicly funded research institutes are then translated or transferred to businesses via licensing of intellectual property or the creation of spin-out companies, the two most common routes to commercialization. And then this is done through technology transfer or knowledge diffusion. And then there is also contract research and consultancy that can diffuse knowledge from universities into industry. And then there's the skilled talent pool, which is absolutely important and significant in this process. So what does this give rise to? It gives rise to new companies, joint ventures, new markets, new products and services, or it would expand existing businesses if they were to license technologies directly from universities. And then it leads to the growth in GDP and so on, that benefits to the national economy and so on. So in this journey, what is important and how should we measure? What should we measure? That's what we're going to look at. So what metrics should we measure? And here I bring out some examples from the UK's top 3 universities, Oxford, Cambridge, and Imperial College London. Now, the reason why I chose these is not because they are the top, but they have a very good way of gathering all these data and making them publicly available. So the data is accessible. Not every university does this quite efficiently as some of the universities who are doing this better than the others. And so we have access to this information. All the information you see on these slides are publicly available in each of their websites. So that's how I've been able to extract them. So if you have a look at Oxford's numbers, now you can see that they have really transitioned from looking at numbers to talking about impact. So if you have a look at their impact report in 2023, it is titled Oxford's Impact Odyssey. And they're talking about internal impacts and external impacts. So in terms of the internal impacts, here are the metrics that they are looking at. They are looking at the total income generated by the tech transfer activity, how much money they have returned to the university from the tech transfer office, the total number of disclosures, the number of patent filings, how many new companies have been formed, and the total number of deals, which is 934 here, which is gigantic for a university. And I bet you that 934 has the 853 executed agreements from the clinical outcomes, because this is something that Oxford does quite well. They have these clinical questionnaires that can be used by pharmaceutical companies for drug development, and also to assess the quality of life of, let's say, Alzheimer's patients, Parkinson's patients, and so on. So they do lots and lots of licensing, and that's how that figure has come to be. Otherwise, for university in general, we are looking at about 100 license deals or 50 license deals, but Oxford's reporting this many total deals because they have these clinical outcomes as number of agreements. So you need to be able to know where to look at and what to look at and how to make sense of these numbers, because otherwise you're just purely looking at these numbers without looking at, as the previous panelists spoke about, the ecosystem, what supports the production of these numbers, the output of these numbers, and that's really, really important to understand. So this is what they report in terms of the external impact data. So they're looking at 58 Oxford spin-out companies that reported to the Oxford University Innovation on the number of users, the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and impact metrics. You can see the 44 reported companies who define impact metrics for their own products or services, and then 21 companies currently capturing impact data from current sales and activities, and the 52 companies who are reporting or addressing the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Now you can see the actual user base is 66 million through these 58 spin-out companies. Now that is amazing. How they gather all this data by constantly getting in front of these companies and looking at how they can represent the impact they create. It's quite impressive. So, and Oxford also report that 90% of their spin-out companies surveyed address at least one UN Sustainable Development Goal. And trust me, if you have a look at Oxford's annual reports that are published, that are available from a decade ago, this was never in the picture previously. So now they have transitioned into really looking at impact, really looking at sustainability and reporting on those. And they're using a very sensible way. They're using very sensible metrics based on their support system, and also put these numbers in a very sensible way where it's easy for people to understand. And I think that's what's important when you're looking at choosing metrics, because they need to make sense. And you need to have a look at the metrics and say, this is what it means. So if you have a look at further, they have broken it down to the 17 areas of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. How many companies address each area? And this is really great because, you know, at a glance you can see the impact that they're making, the number of companies in each of these areas, where the strengths are, and so on. Now, if we switch to Cambridge Enterprise, again, these are the numbers that they basically measure in terms of technology and knowledge transfer. And so, unlike Oxford, they're looking at tech transfer and investment numbers. Oxford looking at internal impact and external impact. So again, the number of patent applications, commercial and research licenses, and so on. I don't have to go through each of these things, but these are easily accessible. They are in the public domain, and you can actually download these reports, read them, and make sense of what they're reporting and why they're reporting them. Again, in terms of external investment in numbers, they mention, you know, the pre-seed investments that have gone into their spin-outs, the number of spin-outs, how much returns they made from equity realizations, and so on each year. So year on year, they publish this information on their websites, and it's a really nice way to look at them and compare between universities to try and work out, okay, what is in consensus? What is everybody focused towards? Then you can derive a common set of measures that would make every sense to be used. Now, in Imperial, this is what we report. And again, this is on our website. You can easily download all these reports. Again, there are various metrics in terms of the number of patents filed, patents issued, startups formed, industry research income, and so on, and as well as consultancy, which is a good reflection of technology transfer and consultancy knowledge diffusion activity. Now, Imperial also reports on its Wine City incubator. Out of the incubator, how many jobs have been created with the incubating companies, what is the survival rate of these companies, and how much funding they have raised. For example, 430 million in this case. So there are lots and lots of information available out there. And here we can see 25 different metrics used by Imperial. So again, this is available. So if you have a look at a national perspective, we can switch to the US scenario, because AUTM gathers this data on a year-by-year basis and publish them. And then recently they published this report, and they collected data over 25 years. And if you have a look at the national perspective, again, they are looking at impact on one side, the economical impact, the 1.9 trillion contributed to the US gross industrial output, and the GDP, and so on. But something that's peculiar here is the 73%. If you have a look at that, 73% of university licenses are to startups and small companies. And I bet the great majority of these have gone into their own spin-outs. And most of our licenses go into our own spin-outs. And that is something to be really borne in mind. So what does this say? You can't discount university spin-outs. If you're coming up with a national program, don't ignore university spin-outs. If you're coming with a national framework to promote innovation, to get IPs out there and really translate them into commercial products, don't ignore universities. Universities are powerhouses that generate knowledge with very smart people who can be converted into entrepreneurs, or let them get on with their jobs with fundamental research and don't disturb them. If they do apply that research, get them to do this stuff, and they could be brilliant. And absolutely right, I think in terms of the previous panel comment, we need more people who are skilled in this. Bring them to the mix, train them up, and help them to contribute. So that 73% is very, very important for us to bear in mind, because this is coming from 25 years worth of data. So I did an exercise, especially for this talk. And so I had a look at Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, and then I had a look at the numbers and the metrics they used. And here are all the metrics that they have used. So I've summed up 20 of them. And now you might question me, this isn't the reason why we got you to talk to us. We want you to tell exactly what to use. And the answer you're going to hate is, it depends, right? It really depends on what you want to evaluate, how you want to evaluate, and what sense you want to make out of those numbers. So you can pick and choose any of these numbers based on if you're running a national program to support tech transfer, or SME development, or lab to market, whatever you call it. You need to pick and choose, and then make sure that you consistently gather this data over a period of time. And only after you've done that, you can make sense of these metrics. However, some of them can actually help you go to market very soon. So how to increase the success of lab to market? That's what I'm really here to talk about. It depends on what you would like to capture as metrics of success, as I just mentioned. So you need to determine these first. So it's got to be bespoke. You have to have a look at what you are trying to achieve and select the metrics based on that. So usually I can have a look at a program and pick and choose, because I've done this a lot of times. And then you need to analyze which ones of these are most important in creating the outputs, outcomes, and impacts that you try to measure. Identify the bottlenecks, and bottlenecks that stop progression, and identify improvements that will accelerate things. And then you need to execute mechanisms in order to make these two happen. And I'm going to bring an example. I think I've got about 5 minutes left, I believe, so I've got to rush. Okay. So I'll bring a very, very good example from Imperial College London that we used to accelerate our lab to market, especially in terms of creating spin-out companies. So the metric we want to increase, the number of successful spin-out companies, right? There's a reason for this. I'll come to that in the next slide, a couple of slides down. The bottleneck that we needed to remove is a better spin-out policy to incentivize more spin-outs, okay? Because this is what the academics were telling us. Oh, you're taking too much equity. You're executing a license agreement. You're double dipping and all sorts of things, right? So we are all used to this. So, and then we also made improvements alongside the policy change in order to introduce support mechanisms and processes, and I was intimately involved in this whole process over a period of 12 months. So we were very patient. We took a very strategic approach of nailing this. So how did we do this? Now, what you see here, and if you're from a university tech transfer office, these numbers would make a lot of sense. So founder's choice is Imperial's spin-out policy. Basically, it was introduced in 2017, and we had two models under this. One was called the founder-driven, and then a jointly driven. Under the founder-driven model, the college would take only 5 to 10% of equity. So Imperial's policy is the UK's most generous, and we are well known for it throughout the world. So these parameters here, I'm sure I don't have to go through it given the interest of time, and the license terms did not agree with the academics. It was really, really, it became a big bottleneck. And then it was for us to look at this, run it as a pilot for a period of time, and then change it. So what we did was, in 2023, we came up with a new model, right? So now we removed the bottleneck, and we came up with a new model to facilitate. So you can see here, this new spin-out policy is the UK's most generous out of all the universities. We give up to 95% of equity to the academic researchers. So this disincentivized them before, but now they have the ownership and under two options. And if you are well versed in technology transfer and especially licensing, you can see that these license terms are very, very, very generous. So we removed bottlenecks and barriers in terms of shaping the policy in a way that academics feel much more comfortable and incentivized to come up with spin-out ideas. So we are not going to basically charge them any royalty unless their venture has earned a cumulative figure of £50 million in sale. And we are not going to charge them anything else. So this is a very friendly policy. So that's how we removed the bottleneck to accelerate from lab to market. And then there were some other improvements made. We used to call them startups, but we changed it to spin-out just to align ourselves with the rest of the UK. And what you see in terms of these other terms is basically streamlining with academic wish and helping them to by providing support mechanisms to smoothen the process so that we can create more and more spin-outs. And then also upskilling is for the actual tech transfer people. They are well versed in tech transfer, but we are going to still upskill them in entrepreneurship. And a couple of things that's happening in the UK currently is, I don't know whether you've heard about the 10U. 10U are members from, university members from UK, the US, and from Belgium. There are 10 of them. Now, the reason why 10U, one of the reasons why 10U have come together is to form kind of like a club and share experiences, knowledge, and act as a single voice to the governments of each country. And so the 10U recently produced a university spin-out investment terms for whole of the UK, mentioning some of the terms that university spin-outs can employ in order to have successful spin-out portfolio. Now, this document is available online. You just can put USIT, and you download it, go through it. It'll give you a very good idea of the general terms recommended by all these universities. So that's working quite well. And the UK government has been telling universities that they are not doing well enough. So recently, the government actually did a review on university spin-outs, and the results are going to be released tomorrow in the UK. And I'm sure they will mention conditions and terms that we have come up with the Imperial new spin-out policy, because we believe that that is where the government wants to head. So in terms of the readiness levels, I think we had a question around the readiness levels. So it's not only TRL, it's not only, I think, BRL and IRL, but there are others as well. So this KTH Innovation Readiness Level is a tool that you can use, and you can download the whole toolkit from the KTH website. And as you can see, there are 6 readiness levels here. And especially if you are focusing on a business venture, all these 6 are important, not just the TRL. So I would say, if we have a look at each readiness level, so we have the customer, we have the technology, we have the business model, we have IPR, team, as well as funding. And this is, in fact, what we are using for our spin-out companies as well as student startups, and it has worked very well for us. So rather than just relying on technology readiness level, it helps them to look at more holistically across the business, across these 6 parameters. And there is something new to this, and that is they have recently introduced a sustainability readiness level, if you'd like to measure. So you can pick and choose any of these metrics, right? But know where to apply them and where to make sense of them. And this toolkit is actually really, really good. We use it ourselves, and it's produced good results for academics as well as students. So in terms of the key takeaways, know the metrics and how to use them, determine outcomes and impacts, work out the outputs, as I mentioned. So this is kind of like your strategy to try and work out what parameters you should be using, determine the bottlenecks and improvements, mechanize them to bring them to life so that you can actually accelerate the transition from lab to market. And I must re-emphasize, university spin-outs can be an excellent means to accelerating innovations from lab to market. So do support them and do make good use of the innovation readiness level from KTH. So that's pretty much what I wanted to present in a nutshell. There was so much more I could have talked about, but in half an hour there is so much I can present. But I'm happy to talk to anybody after the function, so I'll be sticking around. So thank you very much, and terima kasih.
Thank you once again, Dr. Viraj, for that very insightful